Hey, this is John Leonard. I'm from Datawa.re. This is Rob Boaz. And
Hi.
today we're going to talk about how to reduce your chances of failure in a data warehousing project by leveraging your technology, leveraging your people, and leveraging your standards.
Stay tuned.
Today I want to talk to you a little bit about what we're doing at Datawa.re and specifically with Rob Boaz, who is an expert in the data warehousing space. He's built tons of data warehouses, involved in a lot of data initiatives, and has a perspective that maybe you haven't considered. So one of the challenges that I see with clients and with the industry at large on a day-to-day basis is that everybody talks about an 80% failure rate, right? Okay, what's that mean, right? It means, you know what, I don't know what it means because I don't see the housing industry having an 80% failure rate. I don't see like the building being built behind us. It's not going to fail 80% of the time. So why is that failure rate so high in technology and specifically within data initiatives?
Well,
there's an easy answer for you. Go ahead and let us know.
Right. Well, I think part of it is when you talk about failure, there's a lot of sides to that. There could be just an outright failure. The project gets canceled because it's just not working.
Yeah.
You've gone a long time, spent a lot of money. Things aren't getting produced and it gets shut down. Another way to look at failure is you do deliver something. It's very brittle. You're afraid to touch it, or at least your own people are afraid to touch it, work with it. That I would consider a failure as well. And then the third type is you build something that is very, very difficult to maintain over time, and it's very expensive. You're doing a lot of redevelopment.
Right.
So the initial rollout might have been considered a success, but it's still a failure in the sense that it's taking too much time, it's costing too much money
Right.
at the end of the day.
Right.
And a lot of that stems from the people, the process, and the last bit, you always hear technology, but the lack of standards that get applied across the board in all those cases.
Right. So if you've got people in sort of one corner of the trifecta,
Right.
You've got technology and you've got standards. Let's first talk about the people.
Right.
What is the problem with the people that are on projects? Because my view is that there's good and there's bad, right? And it's like the bell curve, right? You got some geniuses at the very far end of the bell curve. You got most everyone in the middle, and then you got guys that are horrible at the other end of the bell curve. And so where does that fit in with what's going on, and how does leadership of those groups factor into that?
Yeah, I mean, I think leadership is a big piece of it. Going back to just the development resources, I think most people are capable. They want to do a good job. Technically they're sound. The problem you run into a lot of times is people work and they're just very disjointed.
Right.
Different people come into a different project with different experiences,
Yeah.
comfort levels in different areas. Some are great at SQL, some are great scripting in C#.
Right.
Some are wonderful at SSIS or Informatica or whatever the case is. And you get those different people in and you give everybody their assignments and everybody goes off and does work, but they're doing everything in their own special way.
Right.
Which is fine because they're probably going to deliver the results you need, but how they got there matters.
Sure.
Especially when you're trying to hand that back to internal folks,
Yeah.
or it's got to be supported over the long term.
Right.
And so that's where we go back to having some sort of process methodology, some sort of standard in place. And a lot of times that ends up looking like a big stack of papers where, hey, here's our development standards at company X. This is how we do our code reviews, and this is how we're basically going to go about this project.
Yeah.
The problem is that that is always going to be sacrificed when it comes down to time constraints. When things have to get done, the standing order is get it done.
Right. And the standards
right out the
thrown
window.
Right.
And and I've been in that position many times. So there is a people problem, again, with the leadership, but also the constraints that are put on these people,
Right.
or sometimes lack of constraints or standards that get applied, and that creates a lot of downstream problems, and sometimes can result in just an outright failure of the project.
Yeah. Well, so I always think about it, and you've heard me say this before, that technology is like a chainsaw. You can carve ice sculptures with it, or you can clear cut woods and cut down trees with it. And the skill set for a guy using a chainsaw to cut down trees, and a skill set for the guy using the chainsaw to carve this beautiful ice sculpture are completely different, despite using the same tools, essentially the same technology. So what specific skills, how do skills factor into that? Like, all things being equal, it's a talent game, right? So how does that talent that people have factor into the success or failure of a project?
Well, a big part of it is knowing what you've got in terms of your resources and your talent pool, right? You use the chainsaw example. I'm ex-military. I like to think about it with like the Navy SEALs versus somebody standing guard duty, somewhere. Very, very different skill sets.
Yeah.
They both carry a gun. They both wear uniforms. They're both in the military. But their usage and how you apply them, hopefully, is very different.
Right.
Same can be said on projects. You've got architects, you've got developers, you have support people, you've got QA and subject matter experts, and how those individual people get leveraged is very important. Where you run into problems a lot of times is where you have a person who's unfamiliar or doesn't have a lot of experience in an area, say a developer, doing design and architecture work.
Right.
Or if you have 5 developers doing 5 different sets of design and architecture work within the process they've been assigned.
Right.
That's where you run into
everyone kind of doing their own
thing, right? And everybody knows where we need to end up, but you lose sight on how to get there, and usually you lose sight on how to get there because of those time constraints. So the people on the project and their skill sets are very important, but also the leadership understanding the limitations of the people they have on the project, not asking someone to do something that they're not necessarily experienced in.
Right.
That's just as important.
Asking the roofer to lay some brick.
Exactly.
In the house.
I mean, I can, put 2 wires together and I can do some basic plumbing, but I don't think anybody would hire me to plumb a house or wire an apartment building. That probably wouldn't end up too well.
Right, it might end up in fire.
Right. Or a flood.
Or flood. Either way. So the people are a factor, obviously. The technology is a factor, but it seems to me that the technology of all the components it always works to whatever degree it works, sort of like a diet, right?
Right.
So every diet works. It's a function of, can you stick with the diet? Can you integrate it into your lifestyle, not just, hey, we're going to do this for 2 weeks and then, you know what, I'm back to my original weight. Right.
And I, in our capacity with SQL Server Stack, I throw SSIS under the bus a lot, but SSIS is a fantastic tool. It does exactly what it's supposed to do. It's kind of like a hammer. You can use it for a lot of different things.
Right.
You can use it to build a house, and you can use it to destroy a house, right? With SSIS, when you hand that to a developer, what you're essentially doing is you're handing them the keys to the process. You're saying, don't just develop a solution to this problem, design it, implement it, test it.
Right.
And if I give 10 different tasks to 10 different developers in SSIS, I'm going to get 11 different solutions that ultimately someone's going to that someone's going to have to own. And those solutions become very people-oriented. They're focused on those individual resources that may be internal resources, they might be contract resources that are going to leave at some point. And if you're dependent on that individual person to build the process and then ultimately support it, what happens when that resource leaves?
It's going to be a problem.
Right.
It's going to be a problem. So then it comes down to standards, right? So there's standards for literally every industry, and there's even standards for almost every area of the tech space. The problem is adherence to those standards. And that's what gets huge buildings like this having a problem. If the electrical guys come in and say, oh, but we got to get this done by Friday at 3 o'clock, and so they just start running, electrical cord all over the place. But at some point, since it's physical, people come in and are like, what the heck's going on in here, right? On the technology side, everything is more black box. So if you're the average project leader or director of IT or even the CIO, you don't see the symptoms of the problem that early. It's when the place burns down they're like, well, what happened? Well, it looks like it was electrical problem.
Well, or if it doesn't burn down, but let's say the project is, over schedule, over budget.
Right.
If you ask the workers back there to build that building, and they all individually go off and they start to build that building without a plan, I guarantee you it's not going to get on time and on budget.
Right.
But I guarantee you that they know exactly when that building is going to get done and almost exactly what it's going to cost.
Right.
And the reason they can do that is because they have standards. There's some consistency.
Right.
It's reproducible. They've done it a lot of times.
Right.
Where in development, especially ETL, data warehousing, there's a lot of snowflakes. There's a lot of things that are done that have been done over and over and over. Change data capture, type 2 dimensional change, all of the basic rules that govern data vaults and anchor modeling and all those things. We feel a need to build them from the ground up every time, and that just introduces a massive amount of risk, not just because it's a custom build, but because of probably who's doing it. How many times have they done that before? Are you sure that they're using the best standards and those sorts of things?
Right. Which is why sort of Dataware came to be what it is, which is a solution for organizations that say, hey, I've got a data initiative and it's not meeting expectations. It's not running fast enough, data's not loading fast enough. My guys spend too much time making changes when I need a change to be made. It needs a new data source, or I need additional fields, and it takes 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 weeks or whatever. Or a brand new project that says, hey, wait a minute, I don't know that we want to invest 12 months or 18 months or 6 months on a project that I don't feel like it should take that long, right? So Dataware really takes the intellectual property of 20 years of data warehousing experience by a group of guys and packages it so that you just focus on the 3 things that are really important: your content, your business logic and exceptions and rules, and then your data model. So how does that change the trajectory of projects?
Yeah, well, I think in this day and age, if anybody's talking about 6 months, much less a year, or following a waterfall methodology, then you probably need to take a look at how your project's running. Even 3 months, using Agile, even without a tool like Dataware, things should be getting done fairly rapidly. But what the Dataware really does, it's a SQL Server framework, and it's a common set of objects that take care of all of the types of things that, as I said before, have already been figured out. There's a best practice for change data capture, incremental loading, type 1, type 2 dimensional change, all those types of things, So why focus on building it again, testing it again, incurring all the risk and expense? That's what Dataware is. It allows us to allow you to focus on your content, on the mappings, the rules, the things that are really going to drive the data that your business needs, right?
Business results rather than just, hey, we've got a lot of guys really working hard in the background, and someday it's going to be awesome.
Right, and it turns into results very, very quickly, where you can walk in, figure out what the sources are, get some data through Dataware, get it out into a dimensional model, let the business start reporting off of it. And the nice thing is you've got a data warehouse. It's already built. There's no stepping back and having to rebuild all of those components that now are, typically part of the, the long pole in the development process. So it really allows you to add a lot of consistency to the build. It accelerates the build, and once the warehouse or the ETL process or what have you is in place, it allows you to scale it consistently, because everything is being done in the same basic way, because this framework reinforces a standard, while still giving you all the flexibility in the world to be able to build out whatever data model you want, whatever rules, whatever data validations, and so on.
Using existing skills that you acquire as you're working with SQL Server.
Well, exactly, because the one thing, whether you're an Oracle guy, DB2 guy, SQL Server guy, whatever your tool set is, we all speak a common language, SQL, right? And if we can boil down our data warehouse and our ETL development to SQL and focus on the SQL that defines the mappings, the pull from the source and into the targets, the updates for data transformations, the data validations, it's all SQL. Everything that gets wrapped around that is dataware.
Right.
So it allows different people at different levels of experience and skill to have a common conversation and to roll something out in a common way while still maintaining whatever flexibility they need to get their work done.
Perfect. Good. Thanks, Rob.
Sure.
So here's what we learned. If you've got a project and you want to reduce failure rates, stick to your standards, have some standards, like everything else, have some standards, stick to your standards. You've already picked the technology, and make sure you get the right people at the right time doing the right thing. We'll check you later. Check you later. What's check you later? We'll see you later. Nice.
Thanks.